Hey everyone, welcome into Stormy Sports. I'm your host, Jason Storms, and this is the first episode of my podcast. It's pretty exciting, actually, but I just want to give you a quick brief on why I made this. I'm a college student, and, going into college, I've been in here for a couple of years now, and I have got a lot of responsibilities, and I'm sure you guys do too at home. But as a sports fan, I want to be sure I know everything what's going on in, football, basketball, whatever sport it is. But in this podcast, I'm strictly focusing for now on football, and I'm going to try to be covering everything for you guys in a time period that's short. Because, like I said, we all got responsibilities back at home, and I can't necessarily sit down for 2 hours, an hour at a time, and listen to everything what happened in the NFL, which is why I'm going to be covering each week in a recap and giving my thoughts and opinions, as well as maybe having a segment or two in for fun in a time period that's relatively short. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to be going in chronological order for the most part, going all the way up from Thursday night to this Monday night football game, and having my game of the week at the very end for you guys to enjoy. And after that, I'll be having a little fun segment about who I think will be winning the NFL MVP. Starting with my first game, we have the Carolina Panthers going up against Atlanta, and Carolina won this game 25-15. Good bounce back win for them. They needed that. Their defense put on Marcus Mariota 9 quarterback hits and 5 sacks. That was huge for them. I think another key part of that game was Donta Foreman. He had 31 carries, which is actually his career high. 130 yards and a touchdown. I kind of want to talk more about that because Donta is 26 years old. He's bounced around a few teams. He got injured early on in his career, undrafted sort of guy, and it's kind of cool to see him do well at 26, You love to see those stories like that, and I'm glad he's having a good season so far, especially that last game. And turning on to Atlanta, I'm just wondering when you want to start Desmond Ridder, because, you're second in your division, behind the Buccaneers, and, you might have some optimism in that you kind of want to compete now with Marcus Mariota, but realistically, what are the odds of you winning this division? Because you got Tom Brady, even though the Bucs are injured, still got a pretty good Bucs team, and I don't really think the Atlanta can live up to that, in my honest opinion, So if it were me, I would try to start Ridder maybe a few weeks later. Say you lose these next 2 games. That's probably Ridder time. If you can't see a realistic vision of yourself winning the division or getting a wild card, I think that's when you should start him, which is probably sooner rather than later. Anyways, moving on to Tampa Bay versus Seattle. Tampa Bay won this game. It's actually the Germany game. Can't really say it's a home game for either of these teams, but Seattle was dead through the first 3 quarters, and Geno Smith almost led the comeback. That would have been something, but a funny play that I just want to highlight that I'll probably show on the screen right now, hopefully, is Tampa Bay had a play where Leonard Fournette threw a pass to Tom Brady, who completely tripped. It was an interception, just a funny thing. But I think the main highlight from this game, some of the takeaways, is that this Tampa Bay defense, which is injured, still did a really good job on run defense, holding Seattle to only 39 rushing yards. I'm pretty sure their lead rusher was Geno Smith. And although Seattle lost this game and their defense had no sacks, basically no pressure at all to the quarterback, I wouldn't take this loss too bad to heart. Geno Smith still got it. He's already proven that. And this offense can definitely potentially bring you to the playoffs. I think that's the goal for this team. I think they're still a great roster, and they can potentially win the NFC West, if the 49ers slow down. But switching over to Tampa Bay, they're back to 500, and I think they're, like I said earlier, the favorites to win this division. All right, moving on to Chicago versus Detroit. Detroit did win this game by 1 point. This was a very interesting game, but despite the loss, you got to be excited if you're a Bears fan for Justin Fields. These past 3 weeks, he's looked like a brand new quarterback, and although he's not necessarily a great passer right now, he hasn't really shown a lot of that. He's shown to clean up a bunch of those turnovers, and with his ability as a rusher, he's Lamar Jackson-esque. Like, it's crazy to see him just break off these explosive runs of, 40, 50, 60 yards, just casually outrun the whole defense. Like, there was a play against the Lions where he just outran his former Ohio State teammate Jeff Okudah and just weave through the whole defense. Like, that was crazy to watch for me. And you got to be excited for that as a Bears fan. But I should also say, shout out Cole Kmet too. He had a great game, and he's having a career year so far where you don't know if necessarily he was going to develop. Last year, he didn't seem like he really was stepping up to the occasion, but this year, I think he's doing that more and more. Switching over to the defensive side of Chicago, this is where they need to pick it up. They did trade Roquan Smith and the edge player Robert Quinn, but this defense has got to do something to make it like not the worst defense in the NFL at this point, basically. I think I wrote down through the past 3 games, they've allowed almost 40 points per game, 38.3 points per game. That cannot slide. Like, Justin Fields is trying to carry this team as much as he can, and if you want to start winning, Bears fans, then you got to hope that defense picks up a little bit. But shifting to Detroit, this was a great win, and I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver for the team, had his best game since week 2. He hasn't necessarily scored a touchdown since that, but he's still such a sure target in the slot, and when Jameson Williams gets back, this offense could be scary. It is Jared Goff, but I would still hold some optimism for Lions fans out there. Anyway, moving on to Tennessee versus Denver. Tennessee did win this 17-10, and yikes, dude. Especially for Denver. You only scored in the second quarter. Russ, we know this narrative has gone on the whole season where he's not cooking. He's not that guy anymore necessarily. But he had 3 fumbles in this game, only like 50% completion percentage. And that shouldn't just be credited to Russell Wilson being like washed, because I don't know yet. He's not completely washed. That's still to me at least, should be credited to the great defense that the Tennessee Titans have. 6 sacks in this game, 18 quarterback hits. Like, that's crazy. Like, you're going to win basically every game if you keep up that pace. Talking more about Tennessee's offense, Ryan Tannehill's back in there after 2 really bad starts from Malik Willis. He's not ready yet, but Ryan Tannehill kind of did enough for this W. And, of course, like I said, the defense has been great, which is a sort of formula that is conducive to success. And Tennessee has done this for years, where their kind of mentality is play good defense, run the ball, and prove doubters wrong. And they're doing that again. I'll go to Denver for a quick little shout out. Shout out Jalen Virgil. His first NFL catch was a 66-yard touchdown. That's got to be cool for him, Great moment for that. Anyway, you got to hope Russ picks up. It's kind of unlikely at this point, but I'm still holding out a little bit of hope there that they can turn this thing around. There's still a lot of the season left. Going on in Kansas City versus Jacksonville. This was a pretty, comfortable win for Kansas City. They won by 10 points, but, didn't necessarily seem that close. Mahomes keeps pushing himself more and more into the MVP discussion. He's got 4 touchdowns in this game. It's like, what throw can't he make? Where is he on the leaderboard? I'll get to later when I talk about the MVP conversation. But another thing about Kansas City, Juju Smith-Schuster, dang, I can't say that name for the life of me. He goes down with a concussion, and who other than recently acquired Kadarius Toney to step in and do a fake injury touchdown celebration. I thought that was pretty funny, and it shows that he's kind of playing with a fire under him for, from being traded for way less than he was drafted for from the Giants. He looks really good, and I'm excited to see what he can do, in this offense. He had 6, just to recap that, he had 6 touches, both rushing and receiving, 90 total yards and a touchdown. But it seems like he's gotten what he wanted, which is for some reason out of New York and into Kansas City, playing with, arguably the best quarterback in the league right now. Seems pretty good. But anyways, I'm going to be shifting to Jacksonville now. I think Trevor Lawrence had his best game in a while since like week 2. You know, he's been kind of struggling, and that's part of the reason why the Jags haven't been doing too good is, just not the best quarterback play, but he's definitely doing a lot better. And with all the spotlight on Justin Fields, I do want to highlight Trevor Lawrence there. He is still doing really good. It is a conversation, who is the best quarterback from the 2021 draft class between those two? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But anyways, another player that I want to shout out in Jacksonville is Christian Kirk. He had a 100-yard game and 2 touchdowns. He's showing to be a great free agent acquisition when, not a lot of people necessarily thought that coming into the season, and he's proven it over the season. This isn't necessarily a news story, but just shout out to him. And kind of a worry about Jacksonville, a reason why they didn't win this game. They had no sacks, no quarterback pressure, and I kind of want to continue to talk about Trayvon Walker. He's been very quiet, and I know he's supposed to be like a developmental prospect sort of guy, but he's only had 2.5 sacks this whole season. Hasn't gotten a full sack in a game, I think, since his first game. I could be wrong about that, but I don't know. I'm not going to raise any red flags or worry about it a little bit, but it is a conversation to be thought about, maybe put on the back burner. We'll see, though. We'll see. I still have hope for him, obviously. He'll take time to develop. Anyways, moving on to Miami versus Cleveland. Miami had a big win with almost 40 points and holding Cleveland to only 17. Tua is just proving again and again how he could be an MVP candidate. Very accurate this game, too. I wrote down he had 78 completion percentage, and he only has 1 loss as a starter this year, which is, pretty significant. Jeff Wilson had another great game. That seems like a good little trade that they traded from the Niners with, and it's kind of funny. When I was writing down my notes, this is the 49ers backfield from last year. Basically, this is like a 49ers, kind of like a little franchise, how McDonald's has different locations of franchises. I think the Miami Dolphins are taking a huge note from the 49ers. Obviously, they got Mike McDaniel, but you also have Jeff Wilson, you have Raheem Mostert. It's kind of funny to see. It's a scheme that works, Not really funny. I'm not surprised. It's just kind of funny to see how they have 2 of their starting running backs last year from San Francisco. Anyway, another thing that I want to talk about from Miami is Tyreek Hill. He is phenomenal this season. That's nothing new. And despite not having, the biggest, game in terms of yardage, he's continued to make an impact on himself, whether that's helping out Tua if he can't throw the ball necessarily as far as he can. Tyreek Hill's been so good at ball tracking. He hasn't been dropping passes like he did in Kansas City. And he honestly might be an MVP candidate. I know I've thrown that out there twice for Miami, but whether you want to give it to Tua or give it to Tyreek, this offense has been rolling. And just to talk about Cleveland a little bit, Nick Chubb had a pretty cool long touchdown, 33 yards to the house. The conversation that should be raised here is he the best running back in the league? You want to give it to Derrick Henry. You want to give it to, maybe not this season, but Jonathan Taylor last year, Christian McCaffrey, all those guys. I think Nick Chubb might be the most well-balanced running back in the league right now. And he's definitely carried this offense where, Kareem Hunt has kind of taken a step back in terms of production, and you have Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, but when's it time that we say, oh yeah, Nick Chubb, he's the best running back in the league, or is he the second best right now? I don't really know. Anyways, moving on to the Giants versus the Texans. The Giants won this one. They continue to, prove doubters wrong from the start of the season, but a huge game from Saquon Barkley. I just talked about it, whether or not, Nick Chubb is the best running back. You could say the same for Saquon. He's having a comeback player of the year campaign right now. I wrote down he had over 150 yards and a touchdown. Daniel Jones, also speaking of career seasons so far, Daniel Jones is having his career year. Just a clean game, just a bunch of solid performances, not trying to make this team lose, And shifting over to Houston, I think the only bright spot that you can really talk about on this team is Dameon Pierce. He's been phenomenal so far. and he's a broken tackle machine. I looked it up on some stat websites, and more than half of his yards, 400 of his 772 yards, more than that actually, are after contact, which he could be on pace for breaking 50 tackles this season, which is just phenomenal for a rookie, let alone just any NFL player. Is he the offensive rookie of the year? In my eyes, I think so. And he's honestly the only bright point on this Houston team that's worth talking about. I think I just said that, but anyways. Speaking of award talk, I should say New York Giants probably have the favorite for Coach of the Year, or one of them at least, in Brian Daboll. He's turned what should have been like a tank for a better quarterback sort of season, maybe like be a little competitive, to, leading the division so far. They have won all of their games. I think every win has been won by 8 points or less, one possession. But, a win's a win, and Brian Daboll's shown a really good job of being able to close games. And I looked at their schedule ahead. This team could realistically go 12-5, if not higher, which is crazy to think from the Giants from last year to this year. Anyways, it's an interesting conversation, to say the least. Going over to Pittsburgh versus New Orleans. Pittsburgh did win this game 20-10. There was 10 unanswered points by the Steelers to win this game. And if you're New Orleans, you're just thinking, geez, this offense, it's dead. The Andy Dalton sort of hype is gone. Who's going to be your quarterback for next game? Don't really know. Jameis hasn't really shown anything. Dalton just had a really bad game. It's who do you turn to? But going back to Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett, I think this was his first game without an interception since the win over Tampa Bay a month ago, which I'm pretty sure was their last win up until this game. This defense can keep them in games, and I think for the Steelers to win games and be more competitive than they are right now to get back to 500, which is a realistic outcome with, it's a realistic outcome given their circumstance. You just need Kenny Pickett to not turn the ball over and be a pretty all right quarterback, be an average, even maybe slightly below average quarterback. He's shown what he can do with his legs. I like what I see there, and I'm just waiting for him to understand the game more and just continue to improve slowly and slowly. Anyways, going over to New Orleans, they had 7 sacks. Part of that is the rookie quarterback, but they have a really good defense. New Orleans, you just wish they had a better offense. Not much to talk about that game, but going into the Raiders versus the Colts. The Colts pulled out a big win here, 25-20, and the Raiders are 2-7 right now, but I don't think you should be underappreciating what's going on right now in Indianapolis. This is a huge win for their coaching department, and it'll bring momentum to their team, which they're trying to rally right now. I would say it's kind of a reload. They brought in Jeff Saturday, and I wrote down the name of Parks Frazier. Huge shout out to him and the coaching staff. Parks Frazier was a 30-year-old passing game specialist and assistant quarterback coach, and he's instantly promoted to offensive coordinator. That's crazy. It's almost as crazy as a jump from, Jeff Saturday going from a high school coach to an NFL coach. I saw a funny post that his last 2 games he lost coaching high school, but he won in the NFL. Just kind of funny there. But no, I think they took out Ellinger, put in Matt Ryan, and even if this is the one of the only wins that this coaching staff has together, they're going up against the 1-loss Eagles next. This is still huge for their momentum and their ability to maybe fight back in this division. I did write down a few fun plays. Matt Ryan had a career-long rush. It was I forget how long it was, 30-something yards. It was just funny because he's not a running guy. He's super immobile, but he put all the burners into that one, and he looks like he's playing with some fire under him after being benched and then re-put in the game. Speaking of rejuvenation, I think Jonathan Taylor just looks way better. He had a stretch of a few games where he seemed a little lost, not as good as he was last year, for sure. But I wrote down, he had a 66-yard touchdown, over 150 yards on the day. Just looks a lot more explosive. And if Parks Frazier and Jonathan Taylor and this running game and, the quick pass game of the Colts can, provide some explosive plays every once in a while, this team could totally get back to winning. And for Las Vegas, talking about them a little, it was a back-and-forth game. There was a bunch of lead changes, and they've lost 6 of their 7 games by 1 score. That is just so unfortunate, and this is a lost season for the Raiders. What do you do with Derek Carr? What do you do with the coaching? Who do you blame for all these losses? Those are a lot of questions that come to my mind when thinking about this team. And what's their future outlook going to be like? Are they going to get rid of their quarterback, kind of tank, go full rebuild, even though they kind of already are? I think they only have 2 wins so far this season. Like, what do you do if you're the Raiders? I don't know. Anyways, going to Green Bay versus Dallas. Green Bay gets a win in overtime, 31-28. And I think if there's a key takeaway to this game is Christian Watson. Aaron Rodgers finally finding a good connection on this team after losing his best wide receiver he's had in a while. But Christian Watson, back to him, I wrote down he had 107 yards, 3 touchdowns on only 4 receptions. And he was making big plays down the field where he'd catch balls. He'd kind of just get through traffic and just take it to the house, which is really exciting to see for a Green Bay offense that seemed dead in the water, even with Aaron Rodgers. But glad you get him back. You're feeling a lot more confident if you're a fan of the Packers for their offense. And switching to CeeDee Lamb, on Dallas, he had a great game as well. I wrote down 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tony Pollard, 115 yards and a touchdown. I just want to highlight, maybe talk about this for a little bit. The future for this Cowboys team is in its youth. Specifically, I'm talking about the running back position, but also more players, like I said, Micah Parsons, one of the most game-changing defensive players in the league right now, CeeDee Lamb, and specifically Tony Pollard in this case, because I think he's outpassed Zeke this season as far as like how good he is. He's definitely a better running back. People have had this conversation for the past year or two. He has surpassed him at this point. Not saying you just bench Zeke completely, but I think using Ezekiel Elliott in short yardage situations, kind of like goal line, stuff like that, where you keep Pollard as like that explosive playback, that is kind of your bell cow now, because Pollard just provides more explosiveness and, quick twitches that Zeke just has kind of lost over, playing in the league for a while at this point. But just kind of circling back to this game, Green Bay does have the potential to, win back and definitely make strides to, not take their division, but compete for a wild card now with the Vikings in that division. But if things keep clicking with Christian Watson, Aaron Rodgers, you get some of your receivers back like Romeo Doubs. Who knows with this team? Anyways, going to the Rams versus the Cardinals. I call this one the backup quarterback game. 2 backup quarterbacks. Arizona takes a win, 27-17, and I think the reason why they won is DeAndre Hopkins. This has been a whole new offense since he's come back from his suspension. Kyler looks like a different quarterback with him in. Colt McCoy looks like plays well with him in. This team's brand new, and even brand new team with him in, and it even allows for other receivers like Rondale Moore to have a good game. I think he wrote down, I don't know if I wrote this down, but I think he had almost 100 yards. He had a touchdown, had a really good game. And that's just all because of DeAndre Hopkins. He's that game-changing player on offense that defenses have to keep him accountable, and, maybe put 2 or sometimes 3 players on him at times. He's a game changer. But switching over to Los Angeles Rams, John Wolford's in. I think the worst thing about this team is Cooper Kupp going on IR. That's tough because that was Matthew Stafford's biggest target, any quarterback's biggest target. And this team is already far underperforming their expectations, and you don't really want to see that future where they don't have their first-round pick. which honestly at this point might be a better first-round pick than the Lions one, who they traded with for Matthew Stafford. Yikes. Transitioning to San Francisco versus the Chargers, this was a big win for the 49ers. Herbert was shut down by this defense. He had a pretty quiet day. He's thrown a pick in his last 4 games, and this one could not have come at a worse time where it was a game-clinching play. He kind of throws it. It's kind of a weird pass. I don't know if it got tipped in the air or something, but you got Talanoa Hufanga just to pick it off there. He's been great so far for San Francisco, just a total breakout guy. But going back to the Chargers, Justin Herbert needs to rebound if this team wants to win, because as he's playing now, he's not playing like his expectations people thought he would play, and the Chargers need him to step up there. Rashawn Slater's down. That's a huge part of it. But, Justin Herbert's got to step up if this team wants to do well. Anyways, going back to San Francisco, this defense is amazing, and it's proved they're sort of, like I said earlier with the Dolphins, this is a very similar team to them in that way and the Titans kind of a little bit, where they rely on their defense and a great passing and a great just like functional Shanahan passing scheme and running game to keep control of the ball, get splash plays when you're able to, and to just kind of take control of the game and win that way. I think I read Jimmy Garoppolo didn't throw a interception. I read that he was 10-2 or something like that when he doesn't throw a touchdown pass. But he had a clean game this game. I think another player I want to highlight is Nick Bosa. He had a sack and 3 tackles for loss. He's been great this season. I think he might be a Defensive Player of the Year favorite. He's definitely a candidate, probably in the top 3 there. He's just been so good for this team. So many good players. Fred Warner had a great game. Hufanga had a great game. Everyone has a great game on the 49ers defense. They're just so good. Anyways, another interesting story I want to talk about is Christian McCaffrey's role on this team. He did get outcarried by Elijah Mitchell. I'm not too surprised by that. The 49ers have for years run kind of like a hot hand, kind of mixing up who carries the ball more each game. Even if you have the pedigree of Christian McCaffrey, who has been one of the most impactful offensive players throughout these last few years, and even this season so far, they're going to use him early on in games, and I think they'll continue to incorporate him more and more, but there's not going to be a bell cow or like someone who's taking all the snaps in San Francisco, just to keep him fresh, make sure he doesn't get injured, and to keep every running back on this team as spry and athletic as they can. I also think another thing that we should talk about for San Francisco is, can they win the NFC West? Seattle takes a loss, San Francisco wins. They're only 1 game behind them, and I honestly think the roster talent going from Seattle to San Fran is pretty significant. Like, the 49ers have a better team, especially on defense, than Seattle. Maybe not so much as offense, as Geno's balling out right now, but this is going to be a tight race to win the NFC West, and I'm excited to see who wins. We have next game that I'm going to cover is Monday Night Football. This is a crazy game, Philadelphia versus Washington, where the Eagles picked up their first loss of the season, and although the scoreboard says 31-21, this was a lot closer game. It just ended in a fumble recovery for 6 from Washington. Anyways, the key takeaways from this game are that Terry McLaurin and Taylor Heineke are so explosive together. Although, Taylor Heineke is a little bit of a young Ryan Fitzpatrick sort of type of guy. He can show to be very streaky. Terry McLaurin's going to be great no matter the quarterback. He's proven that since his rookie year. But they're great together. Brian Robinson also had a good game too. It's cool to see the rookie kind of take the reins over Antonio Gibson right now. But the main reason why they won this game is the defense stepping up big late in the fourth quarter of this game, causing 3 fumbles to Philadelphia in that fourth quarter and sealing the game up for Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown was pretty quiet this game. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think it might be good for them to get this first loss out of the way. They've had the pressure and building anxiety of going undefeated. Most likely that's been happening inside their building. So I think it's good just to get the first one out of the way so that whether your fans are pressuring you to go undefeated or, you're in your head trying to not get that first loss, it's going to happen, It's so hard to go undefeated, especially in this league where, players can just be so good at just like the most random times and everything's so volatile. But I think it's a good loss for the Eagles to kind of get that one under their belt and just go back to business as usual without all that pressure, stress, and anxiety that they might have from trying to go undefeated. Anyways, going on to my game of the week, the Minnesota Vikings versus the Buffalo Bills. Getting a win away in overtime against Buffalo is huge, and it just shows how insane Justin Jefferson is. He had over 200 yards this game, or nearly 200 yards, I should say. Nearly 200 yards and a touchdown. And is he the most impactful wide receiver in the league right now, like other than Tyreek Hill? It's a good debate going on there. It's nuts because I feel like that sort of performance from him has been normalized where he's getting 150 yards and a touchdown, stuff like that. Like, he is helping this offense so much, and the Vikings are 8-0 right now. They could genuinely win the NFC, as they're tied with the Eagles right now. But back to this game, Josh Allen had a lot of yards, but he did have a couple turnovers late in the game. But talking about this game, there's so many heroics, goal line stops, turnovers that it just made this so memorable. The game ended in a Josh Allen throw to the end zone, intercepted by Patrick Peterson. Seemed kind of like a forced ball, but wow, what a game, man! This is probably going to be the game of the year, in my opinion, and it could be the game of the past few years as well. Just a crazy show. Anyways, I'm going to transition. That was my NFL recap. I'm transitioning to my top 5 people in the MVP race. Starting off with Tua Tagovailoa. He's don't want to just be like the stats guy, but he has the highest QBR so far in this league. He leads the NFL, and I think the reason why he's not higher is he hasn't played in every single game, since he nearly died. Yikes, dude. But that could probably add to his narrative too, going from severely concussed and he shouldn't be playing to, just a crazy game after game, just proving how great his accuracy, especially in the red zone, is. He's having a Drew Brees-esque season right now, and it's just crazy to see that. From entering the season being all right, this guy's been average maybe for the past 2 years, and now he's leading one of the best offenses in the NFL. At number 4, I have Geno Smith. I think a lot of this is the narrative that's been around him as his team is performing the worst out of the other guys on this list. But, going from a backup quarterback that, people had already written off. This isn't a new narrative, but he hasn't written back, that sort of thing. He leads the NFL in completion percentage, which is just crazy to think about. And he's not just a, stoic in the pocket sort of guy. He has that rushing threat too. Just a really dynamic quarterback for someone who was written off, all those years ago. Number 3, I'm going to have Jalen Hurts. His team falls to 8-1. I think if he didn't lose that game, he would maybe be higher in my MVP discussion. But he's gotten incrementally better year after year. Just his accuracy and poise. I think his pocket presence has just improved so much. And he's making plays down the field with A.J. Brown. And then he'll roll out and scramble and make a huge play. There's not many quarterbacks in the league that can do what he does. And he's proving that him and A.J. Brown are a top 3 wide receiver quarterback duo, along with, Tua and another guy on this list that I'm going to talk about very shortly. In fact, I'm talking about him now. Josh Allen is my number 2 MVP guy right now. I think his team lost. That's a little on him. That's why he's probably not number 1 right now. But he's having another crazy year. It's nothing new. He can just throw the ball basically wherever he wants. He's got Stephon Diggs, who him and Diggs are definitely certified in that top 3 wide receiver quarterback duo. And like I said, he's not just a throwing threat. In the modern NFL, you got to be a two-way guy to be in the MVP conversation basically. And, well, he's been doing that so far. He's Cam Newton-esque, prime Cam Newton-esque with maybe even more power to his running game. But he's crazy. And then at number 1 in my MVP race, this shouldn't really be a surprise. I have Patrick Mahomes. Just kind of business as normal Mahomes. Just so good. Even without Tyreek Hill, he's finding ways, with Kelsey, whether it's with Juju or, this week, or Kadarius Toney, that there isn't a play that he can't make. And he's definitely not as mobile as these other guys, but he's still mobile enough, certainly very, pretty normal, pretty mobile, compared to the average quarterback, that there's not a play, like I said, he can't make. And he's playing the best quarterback in the NFL right now. Anyways, that's been my show. If you like what I'm doing here, this is a whole new thing for me. If you like my culture that I'm kind of building here, make sure you hit that hit that follow. It means a lot to me. And I hope you have a great day and fantastic weather. Peace.